There's angles on these stories that are in the news that nobody's talking about. For instance, what's really going on with the Pfizer Project Veritas cover-up after the bombshell report about manipulating the virus for profit. Palestinians once again have killed 7 Jews in a murderous rampage in Jerusalem. Is this the precursor to more war in the Middle East? And cities across America are actually getting fed up with the kabuki theater that shows up every time a race issue can be exploited by the left. Americans are wising up, and so should you. Welcome to Prophetic Convergence. We love Prophetic Convergence because it's one of the few shows where you can actually have a Middle East perspective, a United States perspective, a Bible perspective, and current events covered with the spirit of faith that is actually probing what's really going on beneath what we call now the 5G information warfare, which is the disinformation and confused information that tries to throw you off. Our Jerusalem host is Barry Segal, who has his own media outlet and observes closely what's happening on the front lines of the Middle East. And we know, Barry, that all history consummates itself right there in the Middle East. It's interesting to me. We got race issues in the United States, which really aren't race issues, but that's what they're working on. And the world just, what is it about anti-Semitism that the world is picking on Israel again? They try so hard to be everybody's friend, to support everybody. Let's start with what's going on in Israel right now. Is the Palestinian murderous rampage, is it a blip on the screen, or is it an ominous trend that is going to increase because the war drums are beating in the Middle East? Barry, what do you say?
Well, actually, I think the war drums are beating in the Middle East, some of it in the shadows, and of course, much more of it developing on the scene. Here we look at, on January 27th, was the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And on that very day, as people were leaving the synagogue in a Jerusalem neighborhood called Neve Yaakov, a terrorist got out of his vehicle, shot 2 people dead, and then went towards the synagogue entrance and began shooting. And this, by the way, was with a handgun. And so he was finally taken out, of course, by a couple license-carrying civilians in the area, or the police that came into the area, and he was neutralized, as we say. He was taken off the scene. Another attack took place outside the heavily visited tourist attraction called the City of David archaeological site. A 13-year-old Arab boy terrorist who had a handgun, went between 2 vehicles and started shooting. He shot a father and a son, actually hitting them both with chest injuries. They're both alive, thank God. The son is actually in more serious condition, but I believe he'll recover. Now, where did this 13-year-old get this weapon? Was it in his parents' drawer somewhere? You know, you're supposed to be licensed here to have a weapon. There are a lot of illegal weapons that will be confiscated. So this is a very boiling point situation, very highly boiling point situation, and could lead to an all-out third intifada.
Well, you know, where I want to see this intifada go is the Democratic Party, because they got a bunch of hypocrites in there. I don't understand Jewish people that are the primary funders. These liberal, coastal, Jewish, white, Caucasian families are so heavily responsible for the liberal influence in the college campuses, and for, you look at even the Antifa, it's a weird thing. You got BLM in Atlanta, you got Antifa, and all the guys that they're arresting in Antifa are all these smug boys that grew up with these elite coastal Democrat liberal families. I hate to be like Archie Bunker here, but there is a demographic reality. I'll tell you another demographic reality here. And that's not just the irony of the dichotomy of the number of Jewish people that fund the Democratic Party's position against Israel, even though they're Jews. But they're pro-Palestinian. And in a sense, they're feeding this. So what you got a new crop of young lawmakers, Barry, that we only got 2 minutes left. Let me get this in there. Willing to challenge the party's pro-Israel orthodoxy, meaning the Democrats, they used to say, well, we're pro-Israel, because they got a lot of Jewish, liberal, and Hollywood, let's face it, support that is behind the infrastructure of the messaging that is the liberal, left-wing progressive message. But there's a new crop of young lawmakers who are actually anti-Israel, and you ought to keep an eye on them because they're Democrat lawmakers made fictionally famous by the left. So listen to this one. The young lawmakers want to challenge the party's pro-Israel orthodoxy and put pressure on the Biden administration and congressional leaders amid polling showing growing skepticism among Democrats about Israel. Now listen to this one. We cannot just condemn rockets fired by Hamas and ignore Israel's state-sanctioned police violence against Palestinians, including unlawful evictions, violent attacks on protesters, and the murder of Palestinian children. Representative Mark Pocan of Wisconsin tweeted, "The U.S. aid should not be funding this violence." His message was retweeted by Ocasio-Cortez, who, along with Representatives Rashid Tlaib of Michigan and Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, has spotlighted Israel aggression. They're anti-Jew, they're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel. These are the heroes of the Democrat Party. They popularize them. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian residents of Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. Israel forces are forcing families in their homes during Ramadan and inflicting violence, Ocasio-Cortez said in a tweet on Saturday, referring to a neighborhood where a Jewish settler group is seeking to evict Arab families. So I will tell you this, the Democrats may find their own fault lines exploited because House divided cannot stand, and the one division that's emerging in the Democratic Party is anti-Semitism is on the rise among Democrats, but not evangelicals and Republicans that are pro-Israel. We're going to come right back in the next segment with the big Pfizer expose. You don't want to miss it. Imagine a prophecy delivered in 1967 that describes exactly the moment we're in right now with a battle in the United States with Marxist socialism and the promise that an outpouring from heaven was going to happen with tongues of fire that would push back on that resurgence of communism in the United States of all places. And that prophecy is available. Go to lancewallnau.com/Hagen. It's by Kenneth Hagin. You don't want to miss it. Well, you'll have to be living under a rock to not have heard about that bombshell undercover reporting done by James O'Keefe with Project Veritas. Now, this is several layers to it. And of course, the secular media, amazingly and not surprisingly, is not covering it.
This portion is too hot to handle for social media. Go to lancewallnau.com/podcast to listen to the entire show.
Well, the rise of Antifa all over the country, along with Black Lives Matter, they're both actually two well-funded left-wing organizations. Now, you know what? The FBI, they embedded themselves in the Proud Boys and the One Percenters and the Oath Keepers because they did a great job of targeting what they said were white supremacist groups, which were basically just opposite to Antifa and BLM, but they never went into the Antifa and BLM universe to go reveal the better funded, more violent, better established history of brown shirts and militia in America. But be that as it may, Stephen Miller asked this question about the incident with these 5 officers. What we should be asking is what has taken place in Memphis politically and ideologically. What took place that caused recruiting standards at the police department to decline to such appalling lows? How did individuals not qualified to work security at an abandoned lot get badges and guns? Somewhere out there, a bunch of good cops, D.C. Drano says, a bunch of good cops quit Memphis Police Department after it went woke. The good guys left, and they said, I told you this would happen. So you see, the police department goes woke. The good cops say, that's it, I'm out of here. You do the defund the police. you start reaching out to anybody and recruiting them. You end up almost with a criminal element with badges and guns who act like a criminal element, enforcing the Scorpion unit on what is the most murderous, destructive city in America. And it should be noted, this is a Democrat-run city from top to bottom, and nobody is covering in the news what's happening in Democrat cities that's causing black-on-black crime to be so violent and so statistically unstoppable.
Right.
But we'll be back again next week with an optimistic look at what's really going on. Oh boy, this episode was so hot, YouTube and Facebook might not be able to handle it. So go to lancewallnau.com/podcast or Rumble to hear the whole thing. Inflation is hammering the stock market. We're looking at bubbles that are beginning to burst all over the place. Across the board, everything is declining. There's a thing called the S&P 500. That's like an index of where all the stocks are. And right now, the S&P is having its worst year since World War II. That's right. We're going back to World War II type stock level trauma. Where you want to go is you want to make sure that your dollar in this kind of unstable environment is fixed in something that is going to increase in value. That's why the Bible is very wise in saying the silver is mine and the gold is mine. That seems to be where that paper money goes when it wants to increase in value during an unstable period. Birch Gold is the company that I trust to help convert an IRA or a 401k into an IRA that's actually in gold or silver or gold and silver. This is a tax-sheltered account. What I'm recommending you do is go to lancewallnau.com/Birch, find out how this works, get a free zero-obligation info kit, talk to one of their consultants, and examine how you could build for yourself a tax-exempt position in gold and silver so that you can ride out the instability of this coming period and not be shocked as the stocks go down. We're watching a tremendous adjustment happen in America, but the Bible says, to him that is forewarned, to him that sees trouble and prepares himself, God will create a way. I want you to make that way right now for yourself. lancewallnau.com/Birch.